DND number 11, Circle of Life in Jesus' Name, Part 3, Chapter 28. It's November 23rd, 8:30 a.m., Saturday morning, the Keith home, Huntington Beach, California. Philip smiled as he stood under the shower spray from the neck down. He'd had to promise his mother 10 times that he would not get his head wet if he could only take a shower and not a bath. He ended up offering his firstborn child to her to raise if he were to get his head wet, and that seemed to suffice. The water felt so good on his sore body. On Thursday, when he thought he'd be going home from the hospital, he got the news that the doctors decided one more day of observation. So, on Friday, he was ready all day to be discharged and go home. But they'd wanted to run a few more tests. Finally, Friday, about 5 p.m., he'd left the hospital. He'd come home, eaten dinner, and went straight to bed after a surprise. The surprise was they circled together and had a family prayer. His whole family had been surprised. His father had mumbled something about doing better in leading his family, and he was going to start by asking if they would pray together. Philip had been pleasantly surprised. They were Christians. They went to church on Sundays. They tried to be honest and have integrity, but they didn't ever really pray together. They professed to believe in Jesus, but did they really? Philip actually hardly ever said an individual prayer like by himself in his room. So when his father asked the family to circle up, Philip had been surprised. Then Lyle had pointed out that Ricky Keno had used the same words when he'd arrived at the hospital Monday night, circle up. And Philip understood that Mr. Keno's example had affected his father. Now, this Saturday morning, Philip woke with a smile on his face, though it was hard to tell because his face was a mess. He had 2 black eyes. They told him because of the head injury, not because Kate had actually connected with his eyes. Those 2 black eyes had become quite colorful. He also had some bruises on his side, back, and arms, but they were no big deal. Leaving the shower, he wrapped a towel around his waist and went to dress. Someone had made his bed and laid out clothes. His mom, he guessed. He drew a deep breath as he dressed. He was home. He was alive. And some kind of miracle was being worked in his heart and the heart of his father, and it gave him such a feeling of lightness and of happiness, almost giddiness. He thought about the others in his family. His mom was usually tired, usually a little down, but this morning she'd actually laughed as she tried to get him to take a bath instead of a shower. She seemed lighter and happier, too. She was a really good mom. She worked hard. She worked a job many hours of the day and then kept the house clean, the laundry done, and she was a great cook. She took good care of her family. His sister, too, seemed different, or maybe he was just seeing her differently. She was like his mom in that she worked hard. She always seemed to have a job, even before she was really old enough to work outside the home. She babysat for neighbors, she walked dogs, she had a lemonade stand when they were younger. He smiled as he remembered that she got mad at him and Lyle for drinking the lemonade when she wasn't looking. He frowned. He also remembered stealing some of her quarters, not because he wanted them, but just to see her reaction. Now his sister seemed calmer, or just different, since she went to work for the Kenos, and especially since she met Logan Adams, who was a really nice guy. Lyle, he was a great brother, though Philip was thinking he'd never told Lyle that. Philip pretty much ignored him most of the time, though they did talk about football. Lyle was a quarterback, whereas Philip was a running back. Lyle wanted desperately to go to a quarterback camp last spring, but there was just no money. Maybe, now that football was over, Philip could get some little part-time job and earn the money for Lyle to go to the camp this coming spring. Suddenly, he realized that goal stirred his heart. Yep, he would definitely do that for his little brother. That thought made Philip think about what Logan said to him, that he reminded Logan of Gabe Tanner. Well, it certainly wasn't because Philip had ever done amazing things like Gabe, but getting a job to help his little brother achieve a dream, that was definitely a Gabe Tanner move. He smiled. He was moved from his thoughts by a knock on his door. "Come in," he said. Lyle poked his head in. "Hey, Phil. How you feeling?" "I'm feeling great." He smiled at Lyle. "And, thanks for asking." "Oh, no problem. it's a lot easier to poke my head in your bedroom instead of going to the hospital to ask you that question. So, how are you feeling? Phil asked. I know you had a concussion. Yeah, I'm good. I got knocked out for a few seconds, but I'm okay. And, Phil, I'm sorry I wasn't more help. Thanks, but I didn't expect you to help. Cade is a big guy. Sorry I couldn't hold my own against him, but that's what I get for running my mouth. Lyle frowned. You said what I was thinking. He smiled. Anyway, I was sent to tell you to come down for breakfast. He finished tying his shoes and stood. Let's go. Something smells good. They arrived at the kitchen table. On the wall behind the table, there was a sign that read, Welcome home, Philip. He grinned. Thanks, everyone. And again, Dad, sorry I caused so much trouble. His dad shook his head. A man's got to do what a man's got to do. Surprised, Phil looked up quickly at his father. Yeah, something definitely had changed. He looked at the table. Mom, this looks so good. Carol smiled. Well, I know you love pancakes and bacon, so everyone have a seat. Melody leaned down and kissed Phil's cheek before she took her seat. I'm so glad you're okay. Thanks, Mel. Let's have a blessing, his father said. Again, the whole family was astonished. His father smiled. Well, like I said last night, I'm going to do better leading my family. Philip is alive, and I'm grateful, and I think we should do better about praying together and telling God how grateful we are. Well, I think that's wonderful, Carol said. She took her seat. Shall we hold hands? Why not? Philip said quickly before anyone could veto it. They chatted over breakfast, and his father kept telling him to finish eating. And they finished breakfast, and Philip was told to go brush his teeth and shave. He asked what the big rush was, and he was given some lame excuse about getting back into a routine. But about 10 a.m., he found out why. There was a knock on the door. Melody went to answer. She looked out the peephole and gasped. Logan stood there with his arms full of gift boxes. Smoothing her hair, she opened the door. Logan, you're early, like 2 hours early. He grinned. I'm sorry. I wanted to tell you, but I was sworn to secrecy. She looked past him and saw his father, who was standing behind a wheelchair. Mr. Adams. He nodded and smiled. Good morning, Melody. May we come in? Your father is expecting us. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be rude. I'm just surprised that you're here. She stepped back, holding the door open. Please, come in. The Keith family gathered around, welcoming Logan and his father to their home. Lyle was sent upstairs to get Philip. A few seconds later, Lyle came galloping back down the stairs with Phil behind him. Philip stopped when he saw the visitors. Oh, hi. Hey there, Philip, Mark Adams said. How are you feeling? I'm feeling pretty good, sir, Phil said. What's going on? He looked around at his family. His father was grinning. What's with the wheelchair? Well, Mark said, how would you like to go to the USC game as a VIP? Philip's mouth dropped open. Really? He looked to his father. Can I? It was Mark who answered. We have the approval of your doctor as long as you ride in the wheelchair. You get to be in the locker room with the team, and then you'll get to meet the team and the coaches, and you'll be at the top of the ramp as they come onto the field to high-five them. And then during the game, you'll come up and sit with your family in the Keno special seats, and if you get tired or start feeling bad, we also have box seating where you can go to rest. And the announcers will introduce you to the crowd at the beginning of the game, Logan added. You're a VIP today. Wow, all because I got beat up? Well, you didn't just get beat up, Mark said. You stepped in to defend your sister's honor, and you happen to know JoJo, and apparently that has its perks, he said with a laugh. Can we take this opportunity to do something kind for you? Oh, absolutely, Phil said. This is awesome. Yep, and you're going to need a driver to push the wheelchair, so Lyle, we are hoping you could take care of that, Mark added. Really? Heck yeah, he said quickly. Did you say during the game I'll sit with my family? I did. That means you're coming too, Mom and Dad? They smiled. Yes. So that's why you wanted me to hurry and eat and brush my teeth and shave. And that reminds me, these are for the whole family, Logan said. He looked at the names on each gift box and handed one to each of the family. Philip opened the box to find a USC jersey with JoJo on the back. Awesome. Wow. Thank you guys so much. Melody smiled. You guys. This is so amazing. Really, thank you so much. Logan smiled at her. It's no thanks necessary. Helping out the brother of my girlfriend, it's a no-brainer. Her eyes opened wide at his acknowledging their relationship in front of her family. Her face turned pink and she glanced up at her mother, who was smiling sweetly. Philip smiled at Logan. Good job. Logan chuckled. New scene. Logan and Melody went to lunch before they headed to the stadium, but they didn't go alone. They went to the Two Sisters Diner for their party of 10. Logan and Melody, Gabe and Taylor, young Eric and Jordan and her siblings, Josie, age 10, and Jamie, age 8. They also invited the two Davis boys, Daniel, age 12, and Jeremy, age 11, so that Josie and Jamie would have someone closer to their age in the group. They ran into some UCLA students at the diner and insults were thrown back and forth, but young Eric and Logan expertly detoured around an altercation. Gabe had been ready to brawl if necessary, but was glad when cooler heads prevailed. Jordan and Taylor seemed to take it in stride. Melody, however, was visibly upset. Hey, Logan said softly, everything's okay. See? No fight. She nodded, but her hand shook. I thought for sure those guys were going to call you out. They did call us out, Gabe said with a laugh. But there's always a choice, Logan and young Eric said at the same time. Young Eric nodded at the Davis boys. You guys would have had our backs, right? Of course, Daniel said calmly. Jeremy nodded with a smile. I was already thinking of ways to get 'em. Like what? Gabe asked out of curiosity. Like me getting down on all fours behind the big guy and you pushing backward. Gabe smiled. I like it. He grabbed a handful of fries and stuffed them in his mouth. Yeah, let's work that out together just in case for another day, Daniel said with a laugh. You got it, Gabe agreed. Well, anyway, Melody said, good job on diffusing the situation. I was so scared they were going to fight with you. Logan reached over and took her hand. I got you, Melody. She nodded. I'm glad you do. He raised her hand and gave it a quick kiss. So are you two, like, out? Gabe asked with a grin. Logan chuckled. I think so, at least until she dumps me. Taylor squealed in delight. Oh, that is so awesome. Melody blushed. Jordan smiled at her. We'll talk later. Oh no, Logan complained. Don't go undermining me. I would never, Jordan said quickly. Young Eric finished his drink. Well, you guys, hurry up and eat. I want to get to the stadium and watch the warm-ups. Me too, Gabe agreed. Let's go. New scene. It was the most important game of the season, and the stadium was packed. It was always packed. But today it seemed more so than ever. College game day was not here, even though it was a big game. They'd gone to Ohio State because it, too, was their most important game of the season. If number 4, Ohio State, lost, and number 5, USC, won, USC would probably make it into the playoffs. First, they had to beat number 6, UCLA. Both USC and UCLA were one-loss teams. It was time to show out. Melody looked around as they approached the seats the Kenos always had reserved. She smiled at her mother and father. They sat right next to Mark and Bella Adams, Logan's parents. Bella held Emily on her lap. On the other side of them sat Breeze and Joey Adams. Their eldest, Sophia, had her own seat, one row down, right in front of her parents, and right next to Angelina Keno. To Angelina's right were her 4 brothers, and then her parents. Currently, Joey Adams held his son Ledger on his lap, and Breeze held Kelston, though she too had her own seat. Melody was not surprised to see Dr. Jeffy sitting beside her husband with her 2-week-old son cuddled against her. Melody had heard Jeffy say to Cam that there was no way she was going to miss her nephew's game, and there was no way she was going to leave her son with a babysitter. Melody smiled and secretly hoped she'd be able to hold the baby sometime today. Jordan's sister Josie sat on the other side of Sophia, ready to help Miss Shelley if she needed anything. Jordan's brother Jamie sat next to Jeff Davis with his 2 boys on the other side of him. Also in this group were the Lee brothers and their wives. Agent Jensen Deal was also present and sat near Jeff Davis. Both of those men, Jensen and Jeff, had wives who were pregnant and due any day, and both women didn't feel up to attending the game. Logan led Melody up to the highest row. The only ones sitting in this row so far were Bree and Ricky Keno. Gabe and Taylor sat down next to them, then Logan and Melody, then young Eric and Jordan. Mark pointed out Philip in his wheelchair down on the field being pushed by Lyle along the sidelines. Every time a player would run by him, they'd high five or fist bump. They'd been told to not touch his head, which was covered with a cap. Mark took out a couple pairs of binoculars and passed them around. Hold on. And passed them around so everyone could get a look at Phil. Logan handed a pair to Melody. She looked through them and then handed them off to young Eric. Logan glanced down at her and she was frowning. "What's the matter, Melody?" She shook her head. "Nothing at all. It's just that his black eyes make him look pretty pitiful." She smiled. "But he's alive and getting better by the minute, so I'm grateful. And Logan, what you guys are doing for him today, I just can't thank you enough." "Nah, it's really no big deal. I mean, we know the USC quarterback," he said with a laugh. And he simply told his coach about this kid who plays football in high school, who is a huge USC fan, and he stepped in to protect his sister's honor from some thug, and he almost dies, and it would be nice to do this for him. It was not all one-sided. The coach feels like it will inspire the guys to fight hard in the game. So it's a win-win. "Hey guys, going live," Taylor said quickly. "If you don't want to be on camera, raise your hand now." "Try to keep the agents off camera," Joey said. "Don't I always, Uncle Joey?" He smiled at her. "You always try. Try harder." "Yes, sir. Deputy Chief Director, sir," she said with a salute. He pointed at her. "Taylor, you don't want to take me on." She laughed. "Oh, but I do, Uncle Joey. I really do. That would be loads of fun." "For who?" young Eric said to his sister. "Not for you, Tay." She made a face, turned her phone on herself, and began to speak. Melody watched as Taylor smiled and chattered away for her unseen audience. "She's a natural on camera," Melody said. Logan nodded. "She should be." "She's just so adorable," Melody added. "I mean, like, she's mesmerizing to watch. I'd stare at her all the time, but I try not to, only because I know it's rude. I mean, she's beyond beautiful, and her personality is so bright and shiny, and she's smart. She speaks so freely and easily. She doesn't get tongue-tied or anything when she's speaking live to who knows how many people." Logan nodded. "Tay, how many people are online right now, watching you live?" She looked at the camera without missing a beat. 18,000, but it'll pick up as soon as I say what I'm about to say. She smiled into the camera. "Yes, everyone, the person who asked that question is none other than Logan Adams, and we're going to interview him in a few minutes. We're also going to interview Gabe, and I know that's who you're all looking for." She turned the camera on Gabe. "Hey, everyone, it's a great day, isn't it? I'm having a blast at the USC game, and it hasn't even started yet." Taylor turned the camera back to herself. "We're going to wait a minute or two to talk to Gabe so other people can get online. So while we wait, let's say hello to the rest of the fam." She began to walk around to each person. "Okay, now that you said you're going to interview Gabe, how many people are online?" Logan asked. She looked at the phone and smiled. 54,000 and growing." Melody giggled. "That is unreal. And she's talking to all those people like it's nothing." Logan nodded. "She's a natural. If she wanted to pursue a career in front of the camera, she'd be an immediate star." Melody looked at Logan with a smile. "I heard she used to have a crush on you." He smiled. "Yeah, she did. That started before we were cousins and when she was young, like about 8 or 9. And then you got adopted into the family and it was over?" "No. The fact that we were legal cousins didn't stop her. She even cornered me once and made me promise to date her when she turned 18. "And did you promise?" "I made the promise that if she still wanted to date me when she was 18, I would take her out to dinner. But I made that promise because I felt sure that she would lose interest once she grew up a little." "So you were never interested? I mean, not even a little?" He shook his head. "Not really. I mean, don't get me wrong. Taylor is beautiful, smart, sweet, funny. She's an amazing girl." Melody's eyebrows rose. "She's all the things that any guy would want their sister or their cousin to be. But she and I weren't meant to be." "And how do you know that?" "Because you and I were meant to be," he said softly. She looked down, then back up. "And you really think that?" "I don't say things I don't mean, Mel." She smiled. "Only my brothers ever call me that." "Well, it's a term of endearment. I hope you know. I won't call you that if you don't want me to." "No, I think it's fine. I think I like it. It's not so formal." He nodded. But I'll still call you Melody too, because, well, you know, music is my thing. She giggled and looked up to watch Taylor say hello to young Eric and Jordan. And here's my favorite brother, Eric, who I'm so proud of winning the Keno Challenge a few weeks ago. He's the best big brother, even though he's annoying. Thanks, Taylor. You know, little sis, you can be a little annoying too. Yeah, but you still love me. He nodded. I concede that. And really, Tay, I'm proud of you too. She kissed his cheek on camera. And next to my brother is his totally awesome girlfriend, whom I love like a sis, Jordan Brooks. Jordan, say hello. Jordan smiled at the camera. Hey, everyone. Go Trojans. Young Eric smiled in approval. And here is one of the newest members of our family, Taylor said as she aimed the camera at Melody, whose eyes opened wide with surprise. This is Melody. She's my awesome new friend. She helps take care of my grandparents' new children, and she also happens to be dating my cousin. Melody, say hey to everyone. Melody smiled. Hello, everyone. I think Melody is a little shy, Taylor put in. Do you have anything else you'd like to say? Melody nodded. Yes. I think that you, Taylor Keno, are just the cutest, sweetest girl there is, and I'm honored to be considered your friend. Aw, now that was sweet. And I swear, everyone, I did not pay her to say that. Taylor pointed the camera at Logan. And of course, you all know Logan Adams, who is in the middle of writing and cutting his first album, and hopefully it will be the first of many. We can't get enough of hearing him sing, and I have to say, when he took off on his guitar playing Johnny Be Good at the wedding last week, us girls almost lost it. Logan, say hey to everyone. Hey everyone, hope you're all doing great. My focus today is on my brother, whom you all know is the USC quarterback. He's worked hard. His team has worked hard. So let's win this game. Go Trojans. And if any of you watching right now are UCLA fans or like Ohio State fans, no offense, I still love you. Thanks, Logan, Taylor said. And now, finally, we're back to Gabe. How many are watching now? Logan asked out of curiosity. Taylor glanced at her phone. Over 200,000. Now stop asking me that, Taylor said, making Logan laugh. They watched as Taylor sat next to Gabe to have a longer interview with him. He usually prepared some insight he'd picked up during the week or spoke to individuals who were struggling and had written into him about what they were dealing with. He would address those issues. It was always good stuff. And he actually ran things by his father or Grandmaster Keno to see what he could do to help people. Gabe said he wanted a ministry, and he definitely had one, because he may not know it, even though he may not know it. Logan turned back to Melody. Over 200,000. I don't think those two know just how powerful they are. You know, we call social media people influencers. Well, those two, they really are. They're influencing a whole generation of kids to have better priorities, to find God, to stop trying to hook up, to stay virgins, to serve others, and to rise up and fight for right. I am so proud of them. Heck, they're even teaching kids to speak better, to educate themselves. They are amazing. I agree. I'm honored to actually know them, Melody said. And you? Do you realize that you too are an influencer like them? I'd like to be one day. My goal is to influence through my music, to teach and inspire through music. I totally believe that's what you'll do, Melody said softly. He looked into her eyes. Will you believing in me? It means a lot. He cupped her cheek and gave her a quick kiss on the lips. Next to them, young Eric and Jordan smiled, then looked at each other. Does that make you happy? Jordan whispered. Young Eric chuckled. It actually does. Me too, she said with a sigh. The fact that it makes you happy too also makes me happy, he said, and quickly offered her a brief kiss too. It's kind of scary, Jordan said. What is? This happy feeling like it's too good to be true. You can't live in fear, 2-3. Don't be afraid. Just enjoy it. Just know that I'm so in love with you and we're going to be so happy for a very long time. Got it? She nodded. Got it. They looked down at the field as the announcer began to speak. They then directed their eyes to the jumbotrons to see a close-up of Phil and hear a quick version of what happened to him, though no details that would mess up the case against Cade. The audience applauded his bravery and the fact that he lived and is recovering. They moved on, and finally it was time for the national anthem and the coin toss. USC won the toss and deferred. Logan could feel it. Things were going to go great. New scene. The majority of the Keno family and friends were in great moods at halftime. JoJo was having a great game, maybe the game of his life. He had already thrown for 3 touchdowns, one a 70-yard strike. He also scored one himself from the 12-yard line when all of his receivers were covered. Icing on the cake, the defense just scored and USC gets the ball at halftime. After halftime. Still, UCLA was no cupcake team and had also scored, but USC led at the half 35-17. It was looking good. Grandmaster Keno stayed calm. He didn't like to celebrate too early. Jeffy was also calm since she was nursing her baby. She looked down at Jeff. He was laughing and talking with his boys and Jamie. Cam, she whispered, I'm getting a strange feeling. Uh-oh, he said with a smile. A disturbance in the force? She nodded. Go ask Jeff if he's checked on Mickey lately. Cam rose and went to speak with him. Jeff immediately pulled out his phone and called his wife. Hi, Mick. Just calling to check on you. I'm good. JoJo's doing great, isn't he? Yeah, he is. So proud of that boy. Me too. Looks like they're going to win. Well, that's another whole half to play, so let's just say it's looking good so far. Okay, we'll say that. She breathed heavy into the phone. What was that? A contraction. How strong? Not very. Do you think you're going into labor? Because Jeffy had a bad feeling and wanted me to call you. Oh, so you only called me because Jeffy was worried about me? He laughed. Yes. But I didn't call you earlier because I trust that if you needed me, you would call me. She smiled. I would. For now, I'm sitting here in a comfortable chair with my feet up, sipping herbal tea, and getting a close-up of the game in peace and quiet. So I'm good. He smiled. Okay, then. I'm glad to hear it. I love you, Mick. I'm still feeling it. She smiled. Me too. Oh, and I just got off the phone with Marissa, and she and Chris are having a watch party, and everyone is freaking out, but also she thinks she might be in the early stages of labor. Cool, he sighed. Mick, I know you wish you could be there with her. I do, but you promised once the babies are born we can visit each other. I promised, and I won't go back on it. Jason already knows that both Chris and I are taking some time off after the babies are born. Okay, well, I just heard someone ask what you want from the concession, so I'll let you go. See you soon. Bye, babe. Jeff ended the call and pocketed his phone and looked to Jeffy and gave her the thumbs up. This made Jeffy frown. Jeff then pulled out his wallet and Gabe shook his head. Nope, I got Mr. Keno's card and he said to pay for everyone. Jeff put his wallet away and looked to the boys. Tell Gabe what you want or go with him to help carry it. We'll go, Dan said. Come on, guys. The 3 young boys went with Gabe and Taylor to the concession. 2 of the 10 agents surrounding the family went with them. New scene. The optimism that the Keno family had at the beginning of the third quarter was dimming. They got the ball first after the half. They got a first down with a run, got another first down with a pass, then stalled out and had to punt. The kick was muffed, only went 22 yards, and it got worse from there. 3 plays later, UCLA broke one and scored. 35-24 was much more uncomfortable, and there was a definite shift in momentum for UCLA. Next possession, the very first play, the center hiked the ball over JoJo's head. JoJo was able to run back and scoop it up, but was taken down at the line of scrimmage. JoJo was slow to get up. One of his linemen pulled him to his feet. JoJo's teammates were screaming for a penalty for an illegal hit to the head. This started some pushing and shoving, but the refs ended it quickly. Cameras panned and put JoJo's famous family up on the Jumbotron, their faces frowning with worry as they watched JoJo try to shake it off. The coach called a timeout. Logan, young Eric, and Gabe remained on their feet, watching JoJo closely. He seemed okay. He drank water. He nodded his head at the coach as he spoke. He put his hand on the center and looked to be encouraging him or calming him down. Come on, guys, Logan whispered. Second down began a march downfield. Their running back broke for 20 yards. After that, JoJo picked them apart, but they stalled out at the 30-yard line and had to settle for a field goal attempt. The kick was good, though just barely, which was not like their guy, who'd missed only one attempt all year, and his longest field goal was 53 yards. End of third, 38-24. Fourth quarter, UCLA reached into a bag of tricks and came out with a halfback pass. They executed flawlessly and scored 38-31. UCLA UCLA kicked off to USC, and the kickoff return got them all the way to the 50. The very next possession, JoJo connected with the tight end 30 yards downfield. It was a perfect strike thrown between two defenders, hit the guy in stride, and he scored. It was now 45-31. The USC defense held UCLA on their next possession. Things were looking up. JoJo marched his team downfield again. A 20-yard run, 2 perfect strikes for first downs. Then he went back to his tight end, placed the throw perfectly. It looked like it was going to be another tight end score, but this time a defender slammed the tight end and he lost the ball. Fumble. The defensive end scooped the ball up and ran 86 yards. Score, 45-38. USC's next possession began well enough with a 20-yard run and 2 passes that gained 12 yards and 18 yards. On the UCLA 20-yard line, JoJo's line broke and he was sacked. Broke down. JoJo's line broke down and he was sacked. Now they were on the 28-yard line. A run produced nothing, jammed up on the line of scrimmage. JoJo rifled a slant right in the numbers, but his receiver couldn't hold on to it. They went for the field goal, and the crowd was stunned when the kicker missed the 45-yard attempt. Still 45-38. JoJo's family watched him head to the sidelines. He showed no emotion. He went to the receiver who dropped the pass and spoke with him, then went to the kicker and spoke with him. Both conversations, whatever was said, ended with head nods and pats on the shoulder. JoJo took a seat on the sideline, caught his breath, and watched the unthinkable happen. UCLA marched down the field and scored. Instead of going for 2, they played it safe and kicked the extra point. 45-45. USC got the ball back and produced nothing. UCLA got the ball back and thankfully also produced nothing, except a perfect punt that gave the ball back to USC on their own 10-yard line. With only a minute 30 left in the game and 2 timeouts, JoJo took charge. He was looking sharp. He took them down the field on a couple of long outs and then scrambled for another first down to their 32-yard line, where he took a hard hit. He bounced right back up. Timeout, 30 seconds left. Next, JoJo hit a slant across the middle for 18 yards. That put them at the 50. Still, they need 10 or closer to 15 more yards to get into field goal range. They ran up to the line to get the next play off in time. JoJo spotted the safety, creeping up on the line of scrimmage to blitz, and realized his wide receiver is going to be open on the backside post. He audibles to a play-action rollout to the right. Everyone is watching the play clock. JoJo claps his hands and the ball is barely snapped in time. The clock is winding down. JoJo fakes and rolls out right. He looks over his left shoulder, sees it open, plants his foot. He's open, Logan screamed as he pointed to JoJo's receiver. Behind you, Gabe was screaming, gripping the sides of his head. The roar of the crowd was deafening. JoJo planted his foot to throw back across the field to his left, but there's a blind spot. With the ball in his hands and pulled back near his helmet, he did not pick up on the strong side linebacker blitzing as well. Still, he hears the footsteps of the linebacker coming, but he saw his wide receiver streaking open behind the blitzing safety, just like he knew he would be. It flashed through his brain. This is it. This is the moment this game will be won. I just need to get this pass off. Just need another second. One more second, he thought. His arm started forward and pain exploded in his shoulder as if he'd been shot. The linebacker slammed into him like a locomotive. The entire stadium from both teams grunted with the impact of that hit. JoJo went airborne briefly, then landed on his back, his head snapping back to slam forcefully against the ground. The ball went straight up into the air. It almost seemed to be in slow motion. It seemed to hang in the air supernaturally, and then, slowly, it came down into the arms of the UCLA safety. The gasping and screams of the crowd scared all the children. Shelley immediately dropped down in front of them to put her arms around them and tell them everything was okay. Bella was doing the same for Em and Breeze for both Ledger and Kelson because Joey and Mark were currently on their feet. The USC crowd watched in horror as the UCLA safety intercepted the ball and ran all the way. The place went insane. But the Keno family and friends were quiet, watching intently. The linebacker who hit JoJo had scrambled up off him immediately and run downfield to celebrate. However, JoJo was not getting up. His O-line went to him, were on their knees around him, trying to talk to him. He wasn't moving. Security tried to keep the fans from storming the field. The camera zeroed in on the fallen quarterback. He was still not moving. He seemed to be out cold. "Mark," Bella said, placing her hand on his shoulder. He nodded. "I'm going down." "Wait, I'm coming with you," Jeffy said as she tried to hand the baby to Cam. "Not without me, you're not," Cam said. "I'll take him," Melody immediately volunteered. Mark, Cam, and Jeffy hurried down to see about JoJo. Gabe was shaking his head. "I saw him coming in. It was full speed, man." Logan looked through the binoculars and then handed them to young Eric. "He's still not moving." Joey, too, was looking through some binoculars and pulled them away, his face grim. He handed the glasses to Eric Sr. Finally, the stadium became quiet as they realized that there was a serious situation taking place. Both teams were on the field, on their knees. JoJo was still on his back, now surrounded by medical personnel. The sports channels were showing the replays of the hit, showing JoJo's head snap back. The replays were put up on the Jumbotron screen. The family looked up to watch, wincing as they saw the hit from different angles. They continued watching, since the cameras were zeroed back in on JoJo in present time. His helmet was carefully removed. Then as they watched, they saw their own faces on the screen briefly. Then back to JoJo. Instead of a cart to take him off the field, they rolled an ambulance into the stadium. Eric nodded at Ricky. Ricky spoke firmly, glancing around at the group. "Huddle up, please," he said softly. "Let's go down by Dad and the kids." Gabe and Taylor, young Eric and Jordan, Logan and Melody, very carefully carrying a tiny Elijah, went down a few rows to be closer to the rest of the family. The group huddled together, took hands, and Eric Sr. prayed over the boy/young man that he and Shelley themselves raised for the first 4 years of his life. Because their eyes were closed, they didn't realize that a shot of them praying was also being put up on the Jumbotron screens. The family finished their prayer and looked up again to see what was happening. Mark and Jeffy had made it to JoJo. On the screen, they saw Jeffy kneel down at JoJo's head, leaning over him. She placed her hand on his chest and then her forehead to his. She pulled away and spoke to her husband and brother, then turned back and allowed the EMTs to brace JoJo's neck and put him on a backboard and lift him onto a gurney. She then placed her head against JoJo's head again. A minute later, Eric Sr. got a call. It was Cam. "He's alive, he's unconscious, he's concussed. Jeffy says his shoulder is messed up, he's out of commission. Jeffy thinks he has a severe shoulder separation and rotator cuff injury. She's going to bring him out of it." Eric hung up from Cam and turned to speak to the family. They all looked to him expectantly, and for a brief second, he felt the weight of all these people he loved, all these people who depended on him. And God, too, was depending on him to take good care of these people and to teach them. And currently, they were looking to him for good news, and he would give them some. He smiled kindly. "He's alive. He's not conscious yet, but Jeffy says he has a severe shoulder injury, shoulder separation and rotator cuff injury. She's going to wake him up." There were different reactions: relief, acceptance, disappointment. Eric smiled. "Find the gratitude real quick, everyone. He's alive and will heal." They turned to watch on the large screen. Finally, Jeffy pulled away and everyone saw what they wanted to see. JoJo moved. He lifted a leg and then put his hand to his head. There was a murmur in the crowd. The sports announcers were talking about him now moving, and what a relief it was to see this fine young man, this talented young man, simply move his arm or his leg. Down on the gurney, JoJo grabbed at his shoulder and grimaced in pain. His eyes squeezed shut as the pain emanated from his shoulder to his chest and back and neck. Jeffy leaned close to his ear. "Hurting pretty bad, Joe?" In answer, he merely grunted with the pain and gave a slight nod. She placed her hands on him. "I can take the edge off a bit." The EMTs looked back and forth from one to the other as they watched this young, beautiful, famous doctor lay her hands on JoJo, and a moment later, he blew out a relieved breath. "Better," she said. He nodded. "Thanks. Where's Coach?" "Right here, buddy. What happened? Did we win?" Everyone looked from one to the other. Again, the coach sighed. The linebacker hit you mid-throw. The ball went up in the air. The safety caught it. They scored. Again, JoJo's hand went to his head and his eyes filled with tears. It took him a minute to get control of his emotions. Sorry, Coach. Joe, I know I don't have to teach you, of all people, about priorities. It's a tough loss. You gave it your all. You have nothing to apologize for. I let the guys down. Bull, you didn't let anyone down. Come on now, Joe. I love you, son. Your teammates love you. Just focus on healing right now. JoJo didn't bother to wipe the tears from his cheeks. He simply nodded and looked up at the EMTs. I'm dizzy, like I'm going to pass out. Let's get you into the ambulance, one encouraged. The crowd began to applaud as they rolled the gurney toward the waiting ambulance. JoJo raised his good hand in the air and gave a thumbs up. The crowd then roared. Whistles, shouts, loud applause from both sides. Up in the stands, the family stood in a circle. Well, that's an ending I didn't see coming, Justin said softly. Eric's lips pressed together. Earlier, at halftime, when everyone else was so jovial, he'd had a bad feeling but didn't say anything. Still, as bad feelings go, this was minor compared to what his family has faced. He smiled at his friend. This ending is not as bad as it feels. No one is kidnapped or tortured or missing or dead. No one has chosen to go to the dark side. It stings a bit, is all. Yeah, but depending on how bad the shoulder injury is, it could be career-ending, Joey said quietly. To be honest, it already sounds like it is, Eric said bluntly. He smiled up at Logan and young Eric and then shifted his gaze to David and Carol Keith and Philip and Lyle, Taylor and Gabe, Melody, and lastly Jordan, who also might be dealing with a college-ending career. A college career-ending injury. You guys know that God has a plan for our lives, right? And when a door closes, a window opens. Trust Him. These little tests of faith, when you feel like all is lost, they help us to put things in perspective, and they make us stronger. So how are we going to handle this loss and even handle if JoJo is unable to continue to play? We will pick up this cross and carry it gladly, with a happy countenance. We will get rid of our disappointment and carry on. You must know the world is watching to see how our family responds. Do we cave in despair over a lost game or even a lost career? Just because God's plan may differ from what path we thought JoJo would take, doesn't mean he doesn't have an amazing life ahead. I trust God that things will work out for JoJo just the way they're supposed to work out. As long as we seek to do God's will, then we will continue to feel happy and fulfilled in this earthly life. So, Philip asked, you're saying that God's will maybe wasn't for JoJo to play pro? Well, no one can know that but JoJo, but yes, that's what I'm saying. We all make plans for our lives when we're young, but the plans we make sometimes are not the plans God has, and so we adjust. But JoJo has been so inspirational to so many people, especially young kids like me, Philip went on. How could that not be part of God's plan? Grandmaster Keno nodded with a smile. That is a great question, Philip. And the answer lies in the wording of your question. Part of God's plan. Maybe it was part of God's plan to have JoJo inspire boys and young men like yourself up until this moment. And maybe now his path changes. He makes a turn. It will be interesting to see where God will lead JoJo next. Let's not second-guess the plan. Your faith is amazing, David Keith said reverently. Well, thank you, but I don't know about that, Eric said humbly. I'm a work in progress. But I heard the whisperings of the Spirit a few minutes ago and knew I had to buck up and help my family through this heartache. And there's only one way to get through a heartache, any heartache, and that is to remember that God is real and He is with us and He has a plan and He wants only the best for us. So maybe pro football was not the best for JoJo. Young Eric nodded his head in understanding. He didn't speak up and say what JoJo had recently disclosed to him and Logan and Gabe. JoJo confided in them that he was close to being done. He'd said that he felt like he was just going through the motions. He felt like there was more out there for him to be doing, something more important than playing football. He'd added that he wasn't certain about how he was feeling. He was just feeling torn between the love of the game loyalty to his teammates and his school, and doing something more. He said his entire life revolving around football and taking up his Sundays, it wasn't vibing with what he saw himself doing. He'd always seen himself with a wife and kids, going to church on Sunday, not away playing ball. He saw himself worshiping God together with his family and friends, having Sunday dinner together with his family. Even this year, he'd felt like he'd missed out on so much family time. Young Eric glanced up at Logan and Gabe and knew that they were thinking about the same conversation. He smiled. "Granddad," young Eric said, "I think you are exactly right, and I can't wait to see what God has in store for JoJo. I mean, really, it's pretty exciting. What does God have planned?" Grandmaster Kino nodded. "It is pretty exciting. What does he have planned for JoJo? For that matter, what does he have planned for you? What does he have planned for Logan and Gabe?" He turned to look at Philip and Lyle. "And I'm really excited to see what he has planned for you two. I mean, when God brings someone into our family like he has your family, it's always fun to find out what God has planned." He looked at Melody. "He's already blessed our family so much with Melody, in more ways than one," he said as he smiled at Logan. Logan smiled and put his hand on Melody's head, and she smiled up at him. Grandmaster Kino went on. "Earlier this year, God blessed our family with Jordan and her family. And we know God is blessing Jordan's mom with a new adventure in her life as she's working on opening her own restaurant and moving from a life of struggle to one of abundance. Not that abundance is important. It's not. Some people are meant to live a life of poverty and show others how, as long as you're doing God's will, you can be happy. And just look at Jordan herself. She's been through a lot, but in the short time we've known her, she's come to Christ. She's put a dangerous criminal behind bars. She's freed her mother and siblings from another criminal, and she's become extremely strong emotionally. God has honed her. And she's brought your grandson a lot of happiness too," young Eric put in, making everyone laugh. Grandmaster Kino smiled. "That she has. She's brought all of us joy. Ricky and Bree love her like a daughter. Taylor loves her like a sister. Young Josie and Jamie are showing that they are going to be some of God's strongest warriors, and this is just one family. Now we have the Keith family, and I'm so interested to see what amazing things come of them." At that moment, Jeff pulled out his phone. "Hey, Mick." "Hi, Jeff. So is JoJo okay?" "Yes, he's going to be fine. Put me on speaker." Jeff looked up at the group. "My wife wants to speak to you all." He put on speaker and held the phone up. "I saw you all pray on TV. The announcers were so touched by what they saw. They said, 'That Keno/Adams bunch, they are the real deal.' I was so proud of how you all handled it. And then they talked about Dr. Juneflower Keno Wallace and the work she's doing in the world, and they talked about the different foundations you work with, and then they talked about you rescuing a bunch of homeless people from the streets, and then they talked about some guys young Eric met in jail, and JoJo's dad helped them pro bono to get their lives back on track. And that led them to talk about the miracle that happened when Grandmaster Keno and Gabe were dead. I mean, I don't know if the announcers were allowed to say everything they said, but it was like a giant testimony, and I'm sure Satan was pretty mad that so much light came from JoJo getting knocked out at a football game. It was amazing. So I just wanted to call you and let you know that the world is watching you. And then I wanted to tell you one more thing." "What's that, babe?" Jeff replied. "I'm at 15 minutes apart for the last 2 hours, and they're getting stronger." The group gasped. "So I'm thinking you might want to come on home," Mickey said lightly. "I think we're going to have a baby tonight." Jeff's face paled. "Mick, have you called the doctor?" "Yes, she wants me to go on into the hospital to get checked." Okay, I'm on my way. Stay calm. I'm coming." She giggled. "I am calm. I'm thinking you need to stay calm, Division Chief Jefferson Davis." He smiled. He knew she was saying that to remind him of how calm and professional he usually is on his job. Bree and Ricky both laughed. "We'll keep the boys with us," Bree assured Mickey. Ricky nodded. "And I think I'll go with Jeff, just because it's easier to be with him than to worry about him." "Fine," Jeff conceded and looked down at his boys with a smile. "Mom's about to have the baby. You guys behave at the Kenos." "We will." Jeff, I'm hanging up now. See you soon," Mickey said. "Oh, yes, baby. I'll be there soon. I love you, Mick." Love you too. And that is the end of chapter, I think it was 28.